In today's video we are going to cover all things Tech Level 3, rushing Tech Level 3 and playing out Tech Level 3 from a fast T3 and from a T2 rush game. Tech Level 3 is a very powerful spike in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds because it allows for the creation of very mobile harassing units such as fighters and strike mechs that can easily kill off workers fairly quickly. It also unlocks the fortress, allowing good elements of map control and allowing for forwarded military infrastructure that cannot be easily overrun. On top of this, you may build additional command centres and produce multiple workers at a time, booming your economy to support larger, high-tech armies. The most important part of this that interacts with the tech below, and why getting ahead of your opponent is a huge advantage, is because the strike mech and the fighter do really good damage to troopers, the primary armies of T2. So much so that it feels like an uphill struggle to defend T3 aggression in T2. Though not impossible, the best defence is having access to the defensive tools in the mech destroyer, for strike mechs, and the anti-air turret or your own air versus fighters. I will relate back to this in a moment after we go over how to realistically cheese a Tech Level 3 and not outright die to a rushing player. If you've not watched at the very least the T1 video that I've done about managing your economy, I would recommend you do so, link in the description down below. In T1, when planning to fast T3, the last 3 workers should go onto Nova. The first, building up the Nova processor. By the time you get the allotted 800 food needed to go T3, after teching up to T2, the 3 workers should have gotten you the 150 Nova you require. You won't be building any additional carbon costs other than the farms and the prefab shelters you need to maintain worker production and get your allotted food of 800. When hitting T2, there's an opportunity for choice in what tech buildings you're going to make to meet the building rule to tech up. You require 2. The options being the Spaceport, Mech Factory, Jedi Temple, and the War Center. Mech Factory and the War Center are often paired together because the first line of upgrades only require food and can be started on the way to T3, and these upgrade the mechs. This would be the ideal choice for mech civs such as the Trade Federation, the Galactic Empire, and the Gungans. Mech Factory Spaceport, probably the safest option and favoured for air builds. The Spaceport is a very powerful tool. I would honestly recommend players who are struggling to manage their early economy properly to go for this. You may need to just buy 100 food because your worker distributions are off. Sell off some excess carbon, buy the food. It's better for you to do so than be stuck in T2 for an extra few minutes. You can add in more centre upgrades later at your own leisure. Lastly, the Jedi Temple can be paired to replace either the mech factories or spaceports, ideal for civs like Naboo and Republic. This could always be done later too though, there is no definitive correct answer here, just what you wish to prioritise. I would be wary in practice of dropping mech factories however, being stuck with no mech destroyer access to defend strike mech harassment in early T3 will be challenging. Making bombers can deal with them somewhat, but they can be out microed and they are stopping you making the fighters that you should be using to be aggressive. The workers you're building in T2 while waiting for your tech buildings and resources to hit the 800-200 requirement should go towards what favours your intended T3 harassing strategy. If air, put them all to Nova. If mech, split them off to carbon and perhaps 2 to 3 onto ore to help yourself get AA turrets if needed. When defending rushes, I'm going to go over two methods of utilising turrets to keep yourself alive here. Utilising 1 turret or 2 turrets. The first model with 1 turret is very simply just building a turret and putting light wall around it. This is going to stop troopers standing next to it, negating its minimum range rule. You'll still be able to garrison and ungarrison workers from it. This is better suited for like wing positions in team games or when it's a very easy T3 and you just want to feel a little bit safer and you don't want to drop 250 ore on 2 turrets. The second model is going to be dropping 2 turrets to T3, and the trick for this is in the middle of T1 just rallying 1 worker onto ore. Within 3 trips walking back to the command centre, it will bring 30 ore, which is needed to cover the 25 cost for a mech factory. With this you can have 2 turrets guaranteeing your carbon line and each other's minimum range rule. Certainly this will cost you a lot of ore, but best for catching people off guard and just cheesing a tech level 3. But with both of these, spending this ore is going to slow you down in terms of getting command centres and anti-air turrets, so use them wisely. If your opponent's T3ing as well, the turrets will not be necessary. There's kind of a lot going on and a lot that can happen for Tech Level 3, and so much of it is going to be learned from just playing it out and experiencing all the variables. But I'm going to attempt to simplify things. Just bear in mind 2 things here, attack and then economy. When you get into Tech Level 3, this is your window to do some damage to your opponent. Most of the counters to the T3 units are reactive rather than proactive. Nobody wants to be building AA turrets and mech destroyers. The heavy ore and carbon costs mean less command centres. Ideally, everyone wants to just be building offensive units and command centres. The battle is about having more workers and outscaling your opponent's economy. By building strike mechs or fighters and going over and pressuring your opponent, you can force these defensive structures and units out, get scouting information on them, and get a sense of where you and your opponent measure up. This way, you can see whether you're going to need to make your own defensive choices proactively, or you can sit back now on a few command centers and get a big worker lead. Bearing this in mind, the person that's hitting T3 first and being aggressive first is likely to get the upper hand. They're getting map control and early pressure, and because they can force the defensive decisions, kill off a few workers and disrupt the economy, they can develop big leads. And if they can build what's needed to then negate the counterattack damage, they'll have a huge lead. When you go for early pressure, things may go so poorly for your opponent that you can just snowball out of control, killing off tons of workers, or even getting enough of a strike mech to mech destroyer ratio on them that you can just kill the mech destroyers as well. Or keep them garrisoned in their buildings with fighters. It's important to realise though when to stop pressuring. Because of the offset, they may have just so much defensively that it's foolish to keep pressuring, and may be more important to sit back economically. Sometimes the damage is just done by forcing the defensive decisions. If you go to pressure your opponent at the start of T3 with fighters and you find that they already have 3 AA turrets, they've done your work for you. That's 450 ore. You can sit back and drop 2 command centers and just focus on your own economy. You're going to be ahead of them. Similarly, if you find multiple mech destroyers. After sitting back for a while, researching your economic upgrades and getting 3 command centers saturated with decent farm coverage and carbon coverage, you can look to be more aggressive again. If you got yourself ahead in this regard, if you were going air, you could look to transition into just going up to tech level 4 and immediately getting the air shield and the fast fighter upgrades, and then you can blitz your opponent's economy with the fast moving high DPS of the fighters, and the shields will soak up all the anti-air turret fire. If you are, however, a more ground-focused civilization, you were probably running strike mechs with war center upgrades. You can look to build up a few more. If you have a big amount of strikes, you can use these to grab up some map control or distract your opponent and run some workers over to build a fortress in an ambitious spot. Likely somewhere that is good for keeping your opponent contained and pressuring some of their Nova or ore patches that you'll want to grab later on. You may also build up more mech destroyers than your opponent and launch a sortie into their base to kill theirs off and pressure them. Both should ideally be followed with a fortress for the map control. Once the fortress is built, look to set up a shield generator that you can stand your units in. You can then drop down at heavy weapons factories, maybe 1 or 2, and start pushing out artillery that trade very well with mech destroyers. This puts your opponent on a bit of a timer to deal with you, as the artillery, as they get larger and larger in numbers, with a shield to double their hit points, is going to start destroying buildings very quickly and reach a point where it's just far too difficult to engage. You may, however, not want to overdo the amount of artillery you do put out. I think for all civs they can be good in a small number here. If your civ gets access to upgrades for artillery, definitely overdo it, as they will scale very well. But if you have no heavy artillery, don't make more than 8 or so. You can then get off to tech level 4, get a heavy upgrade and range upgrade for your artillery, and add a few cannons too, or whatever your civ you're playing is good at. Getting lots of heavy mech destroyers to deal with ground units and cannons for buildings, or maybe getting repeater troopers for ground DPS and grenadiers for anti-mech and cannons for buildings. So if we look back, we can see a large opportunity for the early T3 leads gained through harassment and forcing resource costs and defensive structures and units to directly impact your opponent's ability to defend either T4 air or forwarding them with more military infrastructure. And I believe if you start looking at things from this perspective, you will have a lot more success and catch yourself before you tunnel in on doing something that isn't getting you ahead of your opponent. Now, playing things out from a T2 rushing game is more or less the same. There are additional opportunities, however, such as if you maintained a high trooper count leading into T3, you could upgrade the troopers to heavy and get the +2 range. Paired with 1 or 2 damage upgrades from the war center, they'll shred mechs in low numbers and can snipe important buildings like the power core. Often, you want to favour having 2 mech factories to spam strike mechs early and follow the same tenets of forcing out defensive units and trading effectively to get that rolling economy lead. Adding 1 air base is affordable too, due to you building up such a large, solid diverse economy in T2, allowing you to maybe force anti-air turrets from your opponent as well. Having 2 troop centers inside T3 will give you the opportunity to mix in grenadiers, anti-air troopers, and mounted troopers also. They can also help you later when you wish to push your opponent after building up your economy a bit. You may have forced them to go heavy on the mech destroyers with your early strike mech harassment. If you already had the range for troopers, grenadiers would be great to lace in with your own strikes and mech destroyers before you're using to push, give you some added differential damage. A few mounted troopers in the absence of strike mechs from your opponent could cause mayhem too in killing off their defensive mech destroyers. Anti-air troopers are a solid choice providing it's a low amount of air to deal with. You find from experience that you're going to be much quicker at reaching a standing army to pressure and then forward your opponent when you're playing T3 out from a game where you've been T2 for a long time making workers. With less time sitting back on the 3 command centres as you would for a fast tech level 3 game, but the ideas are more or less the same. Get a forward up in an advantageous position where you can both defend it well and it cuts off some resources for your opponent. And from this point, it's just keeping your units active and pressuring, keeping the worker count growing, and add additional command centres in nice spots and grab up the resources on the map for you. Try to spread them out a bit so that they can't all be shut down by the same unit group, and slowly work your way up to 120 to 150 workers. Get T4 when you can afford it. I hope that this breakdown of things has made some sense to the people who are watching, and I thank you for making it here to the end. I am trying to keep this video very general and may have more in-depth ones later covering certain aspects like the raiding micro and maybe the specific Civ orientated strategies. As always, if you enjoyed the content, please consider liking the video, leaving some feedback. It really helps the channel grow. If you want to join our GBG Discord community, you'll find the invite link down below also. And if you want to help out the channel in a monetary way or buy me a coffee, as thanks, you'll find my PayPal link down below. Thank you and take care. Goodbye.